Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. And today we're going to read a little bit about surrender, talk about how it's important to alcoholics and addicts in recovery and to life in general. I'm going to start by reading some from The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. And in this section, he says, if you want permanent peace, permanent joy, and permanent happiness, you have to get through to the other side of inner turmoil. You can experience a life in which waves of love can rush up inside of you anytime you want. It is the nature of your being. You simply have to go to the other side of the psyche. You do that by letting go of the tendency to cling. You do it by not using your mind to build false solidity. You just decide once and for all to take the journey by constantly letting go. At this point, the journey becomes very quick. You will go through the part of you that has always been scared to death, and you'll see how that part has always struggled to hold it all together. If you don't feed that part, if you just keep letting go and don't let it cling, eventually you will fall behind the false solidity. This is not something you do, it is something that happens to you. So the idea of surrender, the idea of letting go, the idea of not trying to be in control of everything is something that's critical to a lot of different programs of recovery, and not just recovery, but to a lot of programs of spiritual growth in general. It's mentioned in a lot of different places. So in my recovery reading, I've come across this idea a lot. First, and most importantly for me, since it's the program I work, through AA. And so surrender and the idea of letting go of the need for control is a big, big part of the AA program. And I'll read a little bit about what it says in the big book of AA about this. It says, first of all, we have to understand, where does the trouble in our life come from? And it says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, although he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. And then the book, it goes on to say, this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. And what does playing God mean? Well, for most of us, that simply means trying to be in control of that which we can't control, of things outside of ourselves. And it also means trying to make those things fit our model of what we think the world should be. It means passing judgment on other things, saying that other things, places, people should be different than the way they are because they don't fit what we think should be happening. There's all sorts of ways in which we play God throughout the day. And if we let go of those, if we surrender ourselves and say, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to let the world be, and I'm going to refocus my energy on how I react to the world, that's when we achieve a sense of peace and serenity that we never could achieve in our addiction or before we started to do this kind of surrender, this kind of letting go. And this is in AA, this idea extends to letting go to your higher power. And so that's one of the reasons a higher power is so important in AA. In Buddhist literature, in Buddhist belief, the idea of letting go is super important. So from the 12-step Buddhist, there's an entire section on surrender. And he says, in the program, we equate turning it over with doing an official third step once with a sponsor. Most recovering people, however, talk about regular renewal of the commitment. Some members say a prayer several times a day or during times of stress. The notion of surrender can be a little difficult to grasp. For me, it's dynamic in that it takes on new levels of meeting with the ebb and flow of my recovery process. And so surrender is something that's an active thing. It's not something we do once, even though, for example, in the AA program, you may do your third step one time with a sponsor. It's something that you engage in every day. For me, it's multiple times a day because my tendency is to try to take control. I want to take control over life. I want to take control over little things. If there's a project going on at work, I kind of get the desire to lead the way in that and try to make people and the project do what I think it should do. Some of the most valuable moments in my recovery have been where I've sat back some and said, and really looked at, where is my place in this situation? Where do I need to surrender this control and allow things to happen and be a part of things happening rather than trying to dictate the way they happen? So it's an idea of being a part of things rather than being apart from them, and that's become very important to me in my recovery. The idea of surrender is something that gets a lot of attention in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He has a whole chapter on the meaning of surrender. And what he says is, to some people, surrender may have negative connotations, implying defeat, giving up, failing to rise to the challenges of life, becoming lethargic, and so on. True surrender, however, is something entirely different. It does not mean to passively put up with whatever situation you find yourself in and to do nothing about it. Nor does it mean to cease making plans or initiating positive action. Surrender is the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to, rather than opposing, the flow of life. The only place where you can experience the flow of life is the now, the present moment. So to surrender is accept the present moment unconditionally and without reservation. So there's some really meaningful stuff there. One of the important things is that we have to get away from the negative connotations associated with the idea of surrender and get past the idea that surrendering just means you're a doormat. You just let life happen. That's not the case. Surrendering means that you stop trying to control the aspects of life which are not within your control. So making someone think something different, that's usually the approach that we have. I'm going to make this person change their mind, rather than the approach of, I'm going to express my opinion, and then not really having much care about whether or not they change their mind. That's the difference between letting go and surrendering to the fact that you have very little control over the world around you, versus trying to direct everything and trying to make everything bend to your will. And surrender's also brought up in Taoism and mentioned in the Tao of Sobriety, which is another book that I've read previously. And they say, life is one of those games where winning hinges on your willingness to surrender. As we have said, whatever you resist persists. So, as you can see, surrender and the idea of letting go and getting past this state where we cling to that which we want, and just getting past this point where we are trying to exercise control over everything in our lives, is crucial to finding the kind of peace and serenity that help us maintain long-term recovery from alcoholism and addiction. And it's really an idea that pervades not only literature about recovery, but spiritual literature in general. If I spent a day just looking for examples of text regarding surrender in holy books and in self-help books, I could probably come up with 2 or 3 dozen more references that I could talk about in this video, because it's an idea that very many wise people have called upon in the past to say, look, this life that we live where we try to control that which is not in our control is insanity. And that's why we're constantly disturbed, because we're constantly trying to control the things around us that we can't control, and we're ignoring the things we can control, which is what's happening inside of us and the way we react to the things outside. So if we refocus on that, if we surrender the idea that we're in control and we refocus on ourselves and what we can do about the way we react to the world, then we start to have a much more realistic and balanced relationship with the world around us. And that balance, to me, is what has really led to peace and serenity. And it's not a permanent thing. I have to work on it every day. I've had to work on it this morning, and I've only been awake for about an hour. So it is a constant thing. I say prayers of surrender every day to help myself remember how important it is to not try to take charge and to try to release and let go. And so it's constant work, but it's good work, and it's work that, as you can see from the books I referenced, and as we can see from the people that we listen to in programs of recovery and in other programs of spirituality, this is work that is critical to finding long-term peace, serenity, and even happiness in life, and in a life well lived. Hope you have a good day today, and I'll see you back here tomorrow with more.